Well, first I'm going to start with a story that I tell still to this day when I go and I talk to women thinking about going into law enforcement is that I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't think anything of it when I went into the profession. Again, I didn't come from a background where that was going to be probably something I would ever do, but I just jumped in. But when I was at the academy, I had in my class, I had four women and the rest were all men. And our instructor came in on, I think, in the within the first week, and he said, "For any of you men in this class that think these women," and again, this is 30 some years ago, "For any of you men in this class that think these women don't belong, let me tell you," he said, "police work is 85% communication, either written communication or verbal communication. And women, by far, are better communicators than men." He said, "Then you take the firearms, and the reality is that most women don't have as much experience with firearms, but if you give them the same amount of time with the weapon and in the range, they are better shots than men." So that's another component. So that just leaves the small, less than 10% of the job, which is physical and might be about size. So you really shouldn't be asking yourself, do these women in this class belong? You should be asking yourselves, do you belong? And why isn't law enforcement all women? And that was like really powerful to me. I didn't know anything, and I didn't know anything about the job, but I was like, yeah, I got it.
Okay, can you introduce yourself for me, please?
I'm Autumn Manning.
Autumn, and can you tell me a little bit about growing up? And was there anything growing up that led you to law enforcement?
There was absolutely nothing in my childhood that led me to law enforcement. And I know there's so many people out there that say, oh, I always wanted to be a police officer, but that was nowhere in my DNA. I have no one in my family that had ever done law enforcement, and nor had I ever thought about it. I went to college and I just needed a job in college, and I started working for the police department there and worked there the last 2 years. And I met police officers in the town that I lived in,
And where was that?
Bellingham. So I went to
Bellingham.
Western Washington University. Yep. And then after college, though, I maybe gave it a little thought, but I went directly on to law school at the University of Washington with the vision, I think, when I went to law school, that I might work for the FBI, only because I had known some officers. And I don't have any better story other than by the time I finished law school, I knew I had worked at King County Prosecutor's Office, and I knew I didn't want to be an attorney because I didn't want to sit at a desk and do book work all day. And I federal law enforcement was probably out of the question for me at that time because I was dating uh, a man that was going to become my husband, and he was already established in a career, so I couldn't move as federal law enforcement requires you to do. So that left me thinking, well, what should I do? And that's how my husband was already a Seattle police officer, and he liked his job, and he was making as much money as I was making at King County Prosecutor's Office, but working a lot less. And I thought, and he told me that some of his instructors at the police academy were attorneys. And I thought, okay, I could do that and give that a try. And I did it, and only did it for the next 30 years after that.
So just to be clear, you have a law degree from the University of Washington.
I do. I do. Yep, for all that's worth. My On the day I graduated from the police academy, my grandfather was winning an award. It's called the Tri-Citian of the Year Award from Eastern Washington. And so I flew after my academy graduation to Eastern Washington so I could attend this ceremony, and because I'm the oldest grandchild. And as he introduced me at this ceremony, he said, "This is my granddaughter, the attorney." And I thought, I just graduated from the police academy today. Today. I don't even get credit for that. So, no, my family was quite taken aback that I had taken this education and was tossing it out the window. But yeah, and as it turns out, have worked with many, many police officers over the years who all have their law degrees as well.
Wow.
So,
Okay, so in 93, you start working for the Linwood Police Department. You're 23 years old. How do you end up at the Linwood Police Department?
at the time, there were thousands of people trying to become police officers. Um, so you would go and you would go to the classified ads in a newspaper and you would circle and you would go take that test and you would hope for the best, but you really had to be in the top one or two. I remember there was an agency, Mill Creek Police Department, which is a small police department, and they had one vacancy and they were only going to take the first 400 applicants that showed up at 7 a.m. And by 8 p.m. they took, or by 8 a.m. they took no more people because they already had 400 applicants in an hour. And so it was that kind of environment. So you just took, you kind of shotgunned your approach and you took what the first job that you could get. And so Linwood was the first agency that offered me a position and I gladly took it.
So tell me a little bit about in 93, where is the academy at?
Near SeaTac Airport in Burien, the same place it's at.
Okay, so same place.
Yeah, and I lived in my case at the academy because Linwood had their students live in there.
Okay. So you're 23 years old, you're going through the training and stuff. Once you graduate and start working for Linwood PD, do you have an FTO when you start?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Go right into FTO.
So at least in the beginning, I'm assuming you're in a two-man car.
Yeah.
Okay. So after you get off your FTO program, you start rolling around by yourself. How is that? You're 23 years old. Any fear for your own safety?
I can honestly say I didn't, either through naivety or training or just stupidity, but I didn't ever, and I'm not a big person, and I didn't come from a background of anything special as far as that goes. But I just felt that I had been provided the tools and the training needed to be successful. And again, I worked in a city agency. I wasn't out in a rural agency where I might have been in the middle of nowhere by myself for a half hour. We didn't have a lot of officers on the street at one time at Linwood, but I just never felt concerned for my safety.
So at the time in 93, Linwood PD is basically north of Seattle. How many officers are at Linwood PD in 93?
Probably about 60.
Okay. What's a typical call that you're answering in Linwood PD at the time?
Well, Linwood PD is a very I want to say a bedroom community. It's a very business oriented community. It actually has a good tax base because it's mostly strip malls and a big shopping center. Not a lot of nighttime population, but it is also, the demographics are at that time were a little on the lower economic end of the spectrum. So we had the typical domestic violence calls, a lot of shoplifting calls, a lot of motor vehicle theft calls, but we did vice stings. There was only 2 female officers at the time working there, so we were the ones that were the bait, I guess, on Highway 99, which is Aurora, otherwise known. And we would go out there and do those vice stings often. We did stings in the park as well, narcotics activity, assaults, the typical lower economic kind of population. Since it was so business community based, they really wanted us to really focus on enforcement. There wasn't as much community engagement and stuff at the time because we didn't have as much of a residential population. It was more on enforcement.
Okay. When you're with Linwood, are there any specialty units that you work on?
Nope. I just worked at Linwood for 3.5 years. So
okay.
It's all patrol based.
Okay. And so in 97, you start working for Bellevue PD. Why do you decide to leave Linwood to go to Bellevue?
So I really enjoyed the guys I worked with at Linwood. It was a great agency, really well run. But again, as I mentioned, my husband then was a Seattle police officer, and he was getting so many opportunities for specialty units and advancement and different things. And in a small agency with only 60 people, you just don't have those opportunities. So I wanted to lateral to a bigger agency with more opportunities. And Seattle wasn't really an option at the time. So Bellevue was the next largest city nearby. And that's where I chose Bellevue.
Okay. So you start in 97,
Mhm.
and give me an idea of how your career goes there. Give me like some of the specialty units that you
Mhm.
worked at there.
Mhm. So I was really lucky my first few years at Bellevue. Uh, I became an FTO, but within a year and a half of my time at Bellevue, they started a brand new special assault unit. And so I got to be the first detective in it. And so I got to set up a lot of the policies and procedures and processes. And it was also kind of a time where prosecuting crimes without victim cooperation was becoming more of a mainstay. So I got to go to a lot of training as a result of that. So I stayed in special assault for 5 years. And then I got promoted out of detectives back to patrol, and I stayed in patrol.
Before
Yeah.
you go on, what kind of cases are you working on in special assault?
Special assault would encompass domestic violence cases, child abuse, elder abuse, adult protective custody cases. So family crimes most, but anything that encompasses family crimes. So that could be a homicide that occurs within a family relationship, all the way down to a lower level. Uh, you know, somebody broke my watch, or something like that. So
Were there any types of crimes within that unit that you found more challenging than others?
yeah, definitely. When I first became a detective, I did not have kids of my own, and I had my first child in my last year of being in detectives. And for some reason, before I had children, the child abuse cases were always obviously incredibly sad. But once I had a child of my own, I really felt it, and I knew it was time for me to get out. I didn't feel I was as effective. Um, I noticed when I went on vacation, I still wasn't able to let go of my cases. I worried about them much more and so forth. So, um, I just those cases still haunt. I just don't understand how people in society could treat their children that
No.
way in the case. And I know there's obviously cases still going on today of just horrific atrocities. But it's hard working them, and it's hard to see the way people will treat their children.
Yeah. Okay, so you leave special assault unit and you go back to patrol,
Yeah.
and then I'm assuming you're on patrol for a little bit. What's the next step?
Yeah, so every time you get promoted, you come back to patrol at Bellevue at least. So each promotion, I would come back to patrol. So my first promotion, I stayed in patrol most of the time. I did become the canine and the F field training officer supervisor for 1 year, but then I got promoted to captain and just stayed in went back to patrol, I guess, again as a patrol captain, and then I did my first specialty unit after that. So I was back in patrol for a good stint, other than the canine FTO, um, until I then moved up to what we called personnel services unit, which is hiring and training unit.
Okay, so before we start talking about the hiring and training, give me an idea. Um, in what did you do with the canine FTO? What were your
Yeah.
responsibilities?
So we had three canine officers, and they were really very self they did a lot of training. We had a master canine officer. He provided the training for the other two canine officers. So they were very self-sufficient. I just had to supervise, sign off on reports, and ensure that we were getting the training hours necessary to maintain certifications, that kind of stuff. For FTO, that is the program that teaches all of the newest officers when they're on the street. So sometimes that involved having to make the decision to move people into remedial training. Sometimes that involved making the decision to have to let someone go because they weren't being successful in this career. But other times it just involved making sure that people were progressing as they needed to through the different FTO program, and as well as then also working with the FTOs to make sure that they were getting regular ongoing training.
So I'm curious. You mentioned letting people go because this wasn't going to be a career for them.
Mhm.
What type of things kind of alerted you, or what type of things did these officers do that went, this isn't the career for you?
You know, I say to people all the time since I'm still involved in police hiring and recruiting, is that there's no shame if this career isn't the right fit for you. I know I, for one, could never be a school teacher. I think that's a very honorable profession, and I'm so glad that people choose to go into it. But that wouldn't be a good fit for my personality. And for police work, um, good communication is probably the number one good part of our job, but multitasking, decision making, the ability to have a lot come at you all the time and not and still be able to stay calm under pressure and manage it all, are traits that are necessary, and not everybody has that. Not everybody. They're perfectly nice, wonderful people, very smart people. We've had to let people go who, have 4.0 in college and 4.0 in their master's program, but maybe they're black and white people who aren't used to kind of stepping off the line. Like they want their day to go this, and that's not how a police officer's day goes. A police officer's day, you have a plan, and then you have this call, and you have to be able to make instantaneous decisions, and not everybody can do that. So it doesn't mean that they're not brilliant, amazing, people. Just meant that that career is not a good fit for them.
Yeah. I want to talk to with you a little bit about management. So, did you always know when you started to get to specifically Bellevue,
Mhm.
did you always know that you wanted to go into management and get promoted? Was there any thought process there?
I think it was just the logical way of the way I was raised. I think it was assumed that if you go into any profession, you were just going to continue to move up the ranks in whatever. I know it's not called ranks, obviously, in other professions, but
Mm.
move up roles. So that was a big part of it. Is I don't think I ever really gave any thought other than thinking that was, the way it worked. But I will also freely say is that I think people have different skill sets, and I was probably a much better captain than I was, maybe the tactical first level officer. I am, super organized and good at making decisions, common sense, that kind of stuff. But there are definitely better people that were, better at tactical scenarios or, narcotics investigations or something. So I think if you asked like the people that I worked with, you can have someone that you can say, wow, they're a great chief or captain, but they weren't, maybe as good, when they were at different roles. And I getting up to management, as you call it, was probably my skill set in a ways. It was a better use of my skill set.
What do you think your strong point was at the management level?
I think, trusting that there are people that are smarter than me in other areas, and just I can juggle a lot of things, so I can get things done. I can make decisions. Um I'm not one of those, you need a committee to make a decision. So if you gave me a project, I would do it well. I'm a good written communicator, especially, so I could produce work product, thoroughly and detailed and well and all that. So
I'm curious in terms of how well the Bellevue Police Department works. When you started promoting, were you putting in for specific positions? Like, for example, you're like, and I'm just throwing out like a captain or a sergeant or whatever else. Are you like, hey, the next step is sergeant, but is it sergeant of patrol or sergeant of human resources? How does that work in the police department?
well, Bellevue doesn't do it that way.
Okay.
And in Bellevue, you just are putting in for the next rank, and you're always going to come back to patrol initially. But other departments do it differently, and bigger departments can have someone get promoted to captain and go into a specialty unit, but that's not the way it worked at Bellevue. For every promotion until you hit at least, deputy chief, you were coming back to patrol in some fashion. So
Okay. Okay. Two areas I'd like to ask you about before we start talking about your current position.
Mhm.
How was it being married to another law enforcement officer?
I think that women, especially if they are not already married before they become cops, are more likely to marry other officers. And I think there's twofold for that. I think one, you work in a male dominated profession, so that's who you're around. You have a lot more exposure. Um, but two, I think as a female, I always said, um, coming home at the end of my day, it's not like every day is some big harrowing, death defying experience, but coming home at the end of the day and sharing your day with your accountant husband, or I don't know, just name any other profession, I think would have not been as enjoyable for me, at least. I think it was easier for men who are in the same profession to do it. I think some men, not all. I'm not one of those people that, puts a whole category, but I think for a small category of men, it would be hard to have their wife be in a more dominant profession, a more aggressive profession than them. And then you add that third component, which is I had to miss a lot of holidays and birthdays and special events, and I don't know that a spouse that wasn't also doing the same thing would have been quite as understanding. So for me, my first husband, I'm married twice, but both times to police officers, and that worked for me. So,
Um, we talked a little bit before we started recording about being a female in law enforcement.
mhm,
And I don't want to say you're unique because there's other, as we discussed,
mhm.
there's other uh, female officers that feel the same way that you did. But did you face any challenges at all being a female?
Um, I well, first I'm going to start with a story that I tell still to this day when I go and I talk to women thinking about going into law enforcement, is that I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't think anything of it when I went into the profession. Again, I didn't come from a background where that was going to be probably something I would ever do, but I just jumped in. But when I was at the academy, I had in my class, I had four women and the rest were all men. And our instructor came in on, I think, within the first week, and he said, for any of you men in this class that think these women, and again, this is 30 some years ago, for any of you men in this class that think these women don't belong, let me tell you, he said, police work is 85% communication, either written communication or verbal communication. And women, by far, are better communicators than men. He said, then you take the firearms, and the reality is that most women don't have as much experience with firearms, but if you give them the same amount of time with the weapon and in the range, they are better shots than men. So that's another component. So that just leaves the small, less than 10% of the job, which is physical and might be about size. So you really shouldn't be asking yourself, do these women in this class belong? You should be asking yourselves, do you belong? And why isn't law enforcement all women? And that was like really powerful to me. I didn't know anything good. I didn't know anything about the job, but I was like, yeah, I got it. And so,
Man, that's really 35 years ago. That's a very progressive attitude.
yes, yes. And yet I still think he was spot on. Now that I know so much about the job, I am like, yes, women really do. We have to diffuse situations because I don't want to get in a fight. I'm smaller. I might actually lose that. Just even with all my training and stuff like that. So that means I want to make sure we don't ever get there and can de-escalate and all that. And so that stuck with me. And then I am sure that there were people throughout my career. I know there were people throughout my career that probably thought something bad about me, but I just kept my head down and I just tried my best on promotional tests and I tried my best every day, and I don't think I was ever held back by being a woman. I mean, you just did. I was like, if I do good enough on the promotional test, I'll get, and if I am worried that somebody's going to skip over me, but then I guess I should try harder. And do that. I think the only other time I had a really bad FTO at my first agency, and I almost quit. He was one of those people that said, before you get any respect, we're going to have to go out there and get you in a fight. So he would try to jack people up to get them angry at us and then try to step back and let me handle it. Um, but I came to find out he was that way with everyone, man and women. So he was just a jerk. So it wasn't that. And then my only other real comment was I had several children throughout my career. And I had a deputy chief that on my third pregnancy, he said, Autumn, you're really lucky that we are letting you have so many kids. He goes, in my day, because I took maternity leave with each child. He said that just wouldn't have happened. And I said, I won't say his name, but I was like, Deputy Chief, you are not letting me have so many children. My husband is letting me have so many children. But thank you. It made me want to have like more after that. Just to just just to do it. But yeah. So again, I just felt like if I did my best and did my thing, then okay. I have a good friend who says 10% of the people are going to hate you no matter what you do in your career. 10% are going to love you no matter what you do in your career, and the other 80% really don't give you hardly any thought. So spending a lot of time worrying about that 10% is just
Yeah.
wasted effort.
Yeah, that's probably good advice.
Yeah, yeah, he was a police officer, but yeah. So I would sometimes get conscientious. We all have our skill sets, and probably for me, I struggle with firearms. Oddly enough, not in any other time other than qualification. Like if the instructor is working with me and it's not a qualification, I do great. In fact, I have beat my my husband many times at the range. But you call it qualification, and boy, my head spins like it's just crazy. And I got very self conscious about that. Um, and then at probably 20 years into my career, I just thought, okay, this isn't my strength.
Yeah.
I always made it through. It wasn't pretty, but I always qualified. I never had to go into the remedial group or anything like that. And you just accept that, okay, not everybody is the best at everything.
Yeah.
But
Okay, so let's talk about what you do now. And this kind of started with Bellevue, but I know that you have a much more technical name than this. But essentially, you started off as a recruiter for Bellevue PD, and you retired in 2023, and now you are what's the technical?
Yeah, police applicant specialist. But I never got to be a full recruiter at Bellevue PD, but I did have two different stints in the hiring and training unit where I was either a sergeant or a captain there, which was in charge of everything related to that, in charge of all the hiring, in charge of all the recruiting, all the background investigators, all that kind of stuff. So my last 2 years at Bellevue PD, it was my name and my phone number that were listed as the first point of contact for anybody interested in learning more about Bellevue. So I guess that's like recruiting, but I had many other responsibilities as well. So when I had the opportunity, when I was eligible for retirement this year, anyway, I the Seattle Police Department did like some other agencies are starting to do, where they create civil, police officers are hard to come by nowadays. So some agencies are creating some civilian positions to supplement that. And Seattle Police Department was one of those where the new mayor really wanted to make a commitment to public safety hiring. And he created 3 civilian positions just to supplement the hiring and recruiting for Seattle Police Department. And so that is my role, is
Okay.
do that. And I work with Seattle Police Department to try to solve this crisis that we all are, everyone in the nation is dealing with.
Yeah, so a couple questions for you. When you started with Bellevue, not necessarily as a recruiter, but in that group, until now, have you seen a difference in the type of applicants?
Yes, drastically. My first stint in hiring was in 2011. and then, I stayed at Bellevue or I came back and, did the last 5 years up until 2023. And there was a drastic difference, noticeable difference in, well, o- obviously there was a drastic difference in numbers, first of all, and that every agency is facing. Um, again, I said when I started, there were hundreds and thousands of people putting in for each job. Um, in the last in my last year at Bellevue, I think we had on average not up until the end of 2022, we were averaging about 10 applicants a month. So was that be 120 in a whole year's time? So
And
we
and 120 in a whole year's time compared to what was.
applicants, and that was applicants.
But what was a good year? But prior to that, what back in the heyday, how many
Oh,
applicants would you get?
close to 1,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, in the heyday, in the 25-year ago heyday, an agency the size of Bellevue would have gotten 3 or 4 thousand in a year. But I compare it even just to my first time in hiring, which was 2011, and they would have gotten close to 1,000.
Wow. So 1,000 to
And
like 100.
so yeah, and um, after we kind of did that, I did make some changes. Law enforcement recruiting has to be adaptable. They have to be flexible and adaptable in a way that we never were previously. We got to do things the same old way for a very long time. And I have experienced and made more changes in the last 2 years to my approach than I did for my whole career before that. And so there were some things when I was at Bellevue that we did starting just in January of 2023 that did make a difference in the number of applicants. But the quality of applicants is still much different than it also used to be a decade ago. I think some people have taken this opportunity for this hiring crisis where maybe they thought they didn't have a chance before and they think they have a chance now, and so they apply, and some of them get a little offended when they don't get hired because they think, well, I thought you needed people. But I can speak for, I know that there is no agency that is going to take on these candidates, those people, because it will just create problems down the way. So agencies are constantly reassessing their standards to make sure they reflect societal changes, but agencies shouldn't be lowering, and I don't know of any that are lowering their standards. So when I say changes, I say, as drug policies have changed and marijuana has become legal and so forth, agencies will change their standards to reflect that. Whereas, maybe 10 years ago, you couldn't have used marijuana in 3 years, and well, now it's legal. So now you have used it. So we're always making changes as far as that goes, but nobody is going to start taking, people with domestic violence convictions or, excessive alcohol convictions or something like that, because that's just going to we would rather go with less staffing than to bring people aboard that are going to be problematic later on. So it's definitely a challenge.
Do you see in this new generation? Do you see any challenges with them? You hear about them being lazy and not wanting to work, or do you see any of that in the application process?
Yeah, I definitely think I have talked often about it. I would love to create a side business someday of just law enforcement hiring is a 3 to 6 month process, and there's lots of steps along the way. Much different than putting in for a job with Boeing or something. And there are people that I see that could really benefit from just a little mentoring or guidance through the process. Interview skills seem to have gone out the door. I don't know what my own poor children have had to listen to me lecture them constantly when they all put in for their first jobs at age 15 of like prepping them for this interview that ended up being, 5 minutes. And I said, well, no child of mine is going to show up, for an interview ill prepared. But, one of the questions, let me give it away. One of the questions, we ask on the oral board when we was at Bellevue is, what do you know about the Bellevue Police Department? And we're not looking for mission vision statement. We were looking for a 5-minute internet search. You could have said, well, I know it's a population of 150,000 and it has about 200 officers with some specialty units, and you would have gotten like essentially maximum score. More than 50%, probably closer to 70% of the people answered that question of, I don't I don't really know anything about it, but it looked pretty when I was driving here, or my wife likes to shop here, or whatnot. And I'm just astounded. You showed up for this interview. Again, one sentence would have gotten you pretty much all the points. But so that definitely, and I mean, the oral boards have gotten much more basic. They used to be much more detailed because you were weeding out so many people. Um, that I think, and then I think, generational, and this is no knock on it, but they want to, be able to apply on, for this is the stuff that departments have to adapt to. They want to be able to apply on their phones. They want to respond on their phone versus you will send emails scheduling interviews and people aren't responsive because I've been told that, people don't check their email as often and different things. And in that way, departments have to adapt. I am astounded within police work of how many calls I got after COVID of, do you have remote police officer jobs? And I'm I don't know what to say. We don't. Do you understand the concept of the role?
And can
We
you
do not.
if you feel comfortable, can you tell a story about what you told me about the guy applying and say, basically the remote position?
Yes. I recently got a call from someone who, again, this is a specific agency, Seattle, Bellevue, and he lives 60, 70 miles away, and he called and said, if I get hired there, are all the roles in King County, which by the way also would be like a huge disparity from the city itself. He goes, or can I be a police officer closer to my home, in his case, Everett? And I thought, you called Seattle Police Department to ask if you could get hired here to work near your home in Everett. I'm just quite astounded at some of the questions that I get.
So, Autumn, as a person that is actively out there looking to, basically funnel people to these police departments, what qualities are you looking for in a good officer or a good officer candidate?
Yeah. So I was at a career event today, and I will say that obviously I work with a lot of different recruiters from a lot of different agencies, and we are not like a competitive people. I am thrilled when I encounter any good quality person who wants to go into a career in law enforcement. I will help you be successful in that process. And I don't care if it's with Seattle Police Department, Bellevue Police Department, or some other agency. This whole nation needs more good people to go into this career. It is a wonderful, wonderful career to go into. And so I will help people be successful in any way. But ideally, you are looking for, comes back to what I was told 30 some years ago at the academy. You were looking for good communicators. You were looking for people with good communication skills, with a confidence. We call it command presence, with a confidence and a demeanor about them that can tell you that they're not intimidated. So, if you have someone approach you and they're meek and they can't make eye contact and they're very soft spoken, then again, maybe that's not the career for you. So communication, number one, maturity, good decision making. Obviously, you have the values, such as integrity and honesty and that, but you can't, you can't, you get into that deeper into the hiring process. But so if I'm, making a snap judgment that the other misconception out there is that people will have something in their background and they'll think they can't do it. And I always say we are definitely not looking for perfect people. We are looking for honest people. I actually happen to think that people with a little more life experience, even some hiccups along the way in their life, it provides them more perspective. It provides them more empathy to people who will also be struggling and not on their best day. Obviously, there needs to be some time and distance if you do have some minor things in your past, but um, we all have things. We all have things that we wish we had done differently. And you just got to lean in on those mistakes and talk about what you learned from them. And I'm talking about, again, small things. I'm not talking about felony convictions or, major things like that, which we also get calls from people with. But so yeah, communication and just maturity and decision making. You can do this profession at 21. I don't think everyone is made to do this profession at 21 because that is a big responsibility to give a gun and the ability to take someone's life or liberties away from them. um, but we just graduated a 62-year-old from the police academy. There's no maximum age to do this. If you have a passion to serve your community and a desire, and you can do the physical agility test that we have here in Washington State, then we welcome you into the profession. There are all kinds of people in their 30s and 40s who made career changes and went into this career, and I think that's fabulous. It's fabulous.
Yeah. Okay, two last questions for you, Autumn, that I always ask. So, how long? 30 plus year career in law enforcement. Did being in law enforcement affect your family?
Oh, for sure. For sure. It's again, it's not fun missing out on those, special moments. My my kids, my second marriage, I laugh because Christmas is a very fluid holiday still to this day in our family because my kids grew up, we celebrated Christmas when we both had days off, and that might have been the 27th of December. So you have to do that. And I was very fortunate in that I lived for much of my career, I lived in the same community that I worked. So I had opportunities at times to be able to stop by my kids' ball game for 10 or 15 minutes during the day and watch them. But most officers don't have those opportunities. So they're working shift work and nights and weekends and holidays, and they don't get that. I also had it a little easier, again, being married to a police officer as well, and the understanding of that. And so I was able to share much of my day without worrying, as some people do, about are they sharing too much? Is it, too negative? Um, and then everybody has some special raising kids and family on top of that. My first husband was also deployed for 2.5 years in two different separate deployments, and that was a challenge because I was in law enforcement and we had kids, and now I'm doing shift work as a single parent during that time and everything else. So, but everybody in life has different challenges, right? Those were
Sure.
just the challenges that I had raising my family in law enforcement career.
Yeah. Did being in law enforcement affect the way that you see people?
Being in law enforcement made it so that I swear a lot more. I don't like that. um, it uh it did. It's probably made me a little bit more cynical, a little bit more sarcastic, but I don't view society as I don't have some lens that there are bad guys everywhere or anything like that. In fact, quite honestly, through some things I went through in my own career, I have a lens that I am much less judgmental than I used to be. I used to be that person that was like, I would never do that, and if someone does that, that is just that's not good. And then you go through some things and you think, yeah, never say never. There we all have life challenges, and we all probably have things that if we could go back and do differently, we would. And so I just accept that. No, no. So yes, it definitely taints you. I'm more sarcastic. I'm more direct. I am definitely the odd, quirky mom as my kids were young growing up at the kids' school, which, I can't believe you just said that, Autumn. But uh but I think that there are bad and good people out there, or, vice versa. I think we all have shades of gray in us.
Autumn, thank you very much.
Sure, of course.